Hi everyone, welcome back to another career stream. As you probably know, my name is Gwen and I'm joined by my friend Daniel. So the purpose of these streams is to talk about different career opportunities in software development. I see a lot of different discussions and I participate in a lot of discussions about some of these areas. And one of the areas I'm most interested in is blockchain development. So about 2017, I started my own blockchain group locally because most of the groups I could find in the area where I live were talking about cryptocurrencies and speculation. And I really wanted to learn and to understand more about the technology and meet other people who were really interested in the technology behind the blockchain, which powers these cryptos and so many other applications of blockchain today. And so I really studied for a while about blockchain and ran meetups and things, and I did write an article back in 2018 that I'm going to update soon. There it is if you want to read it. It's about all the resources and things that I found useful when I was getting into blockchain development. And so I thought this would be an interesting topic today because I've worked at a couple different companies doing smart contracts and with some areas of blockchain, and I've really been interested in it for several years. And I think one of the coolest things about it is that when you learn software development, you know, it's a field that's kind of adjacent to regular, what I call regular software development, like web or mobile or backend or whatever, that you can use the same or similar technologies to build blockchains and applications for blockchains. You just need a little bit of extra understanding, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm joined by my good friend Daniel Lomelino. We've worked together in the past. He's actually been on the channel before. It was a while ago to do some Python challenges, and he's also a founding member of my blockchain developers group, and he's working on some really cool blockchain projects now. He's also a senior software engineer with 20 years of experience, so I'm really excited to get his viewpoint on the future of tech and how the blockchain industry is going. So Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, Glenn. You kind of introduced me a little bit there already, but yeah, that's my background is software development, programming. It's, it's become all on the web these days. I started back in like system programming with some lower level languages and worked my way towards, the evolution of this technology. And that's led me from those kind of languages to web languages and now into this topic of blockchain, because it's the new, as we'll talk about, the new technology that is emerging here.
So I feel like every time I talk to you, you have something to say about blockchain or a new project you're excited about or a new implementation or potential application of blockchain. So what is it that got you so interested in blockchain? Kind of tell us about your pathway, not all 20 years of your software development career, but just like what pertains to leading into blockchain and why you're interested in it.
Yeah, that one's generally a little blurry to me because it kind of phased in. It wasn't one moment that I remember that's just like, wow, blockchain. It was kind of actually late in the history. If you think about the history of blockchain, it's, Bitcoin, the granddaddy of blockchain, back in 2008, 2009, I didn't really take notice of it until I want to say 2015 or 2016. So we're talking like 6 or 7 years into the evolution of this technology before I really woke up to it. And so it really started there. Where else can it start but Bitcoin, because it was the prevalent thing, and it was really one of the only things to latch onto back then. So I remember just kind of discovering Bitcoin and having that moment I think everyone has, where like, is this a real thing? Is this just some fleeting, I don't know, fleeting technology that somebody's trying to push. But eventually, I think we all started realizing what it's really capable of. And about, I want to say a little over a year ago, I started taking it really seriously. So I'd followed it for those years in between pretty closely, but just within the last year or year and a half, I've started really just enveloping my life in it.
What do you mean by enveloping your life in it?
Well, spending most of my free time researching, being what I would call a blockchain enthusiast, because there's just so much out there nowadays that um, there's just it's kind of overwhelming when you look at the landscape of blockchain. And so it has the parallels with software development, that you can have this kind of analysis paralysis where there's just so much to know about it and so many different ways it's headed, that it takes some time to really fill in the pieces of that picture in your mind. And so that's what I've been doing, and I feel like I'm at a pretty good place with it, though I don't know if there are many people that are true experts at everything going on, but uh, it's just a little nebulous at times. So just kind of, yeah, a lot of research, a lot of looking into the development side of it, what projects are out there doing things, and things like that.
So what? Coming from a software development background, getting into blockchain, I guess, what perspective did that give you about blockchain? Like, how did that influence how you think about blockchain? Do you understand
It,
what I'm asking?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. It struck me as a fundamental technology and not just a not just another thing to learn for fun. It struck me as this kind of this thing that will redefine certain aspects of not just technology, but also the world's systems and how they work.
So real quick, because you came from systems to web, and you said that became ubiquitous now, like almost everything is the web. Do you feel the same way about blockchain?
Yeah, but
Seeing that before?
with some nuance, with some nuance built in there, because with the web, it's obvious that we're using it. You get on a browser, you go to a website or an app or whatever you want to call it, and it's very obvious as part of the experience that you're interacting with this thing. With the blockchain, it's more like it's more transparent, and you don't really have to know that it exists necessarily to know you're using it. In fact, I'm sure there are many systems we already use that we don't have any idea that it's running on blockchain technology. And in that sense, it's got that nuance to it where it can underlie all this stuff in a way that's extremely beneficial, but at the same time, unless you want to, you don't have to dive into the technical aspects of it. And also, with from coming from system programming to web, there's a transition there of the ecosystem and the environment surrounding it. So you're dealing with things in system level programming that you don't think about when you're doing web programming, like memory management and low level concepts like that. And then in the web, there's a whole HTTP browser environment, client server communication type of thing that you don't necessarily deal with in systems level programming. And so going then from web programming to blockchain, there's that same kind of transition where there's this new ecosystem surrounding it that becomes part of what you're kind of entangled in when you're working in it. And so it's not just learning a language, it's not just learning a high level of how this thing exists, but it's interacting with it in its own environment.
So, uh, so kind of jumping into, people in the chat are asking about specific blockchains. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
well,
it's
actually,
natural.
what?
It's natural to want to know about this and that
Yeah,
project.
because it's exciting. Every new project is kind of hyped up, and you want to learn everything. When I started, I think it was mostly like Ethereum and then Hyperledger I got into, and now it's like there's so many different platforms. So, uh, so next I want to talk about kind of the current state of blockchain development. So, you've been in it for a couple years now, and you do a lot of research and stuff. So, I want to talk about the trends. Like, what big next things or trends do you see in the blockchain space, or what's going on, and what do you think is going to go on?
There's a lot going on right now. There are a couple of trends, or whatever you want to call it, that jump out. If any of you look at any blockchain news sites, I mean, decentralized finance, DeFi, is the hot topic right now, and with rightly so. It's exciting. It's kind of like the continuation of the origin story of cryptocurrencies, because they set out to be this store of value that's almost like subverting the traditional finance systems. And so to bring those aspects of decentralized finance even further into the other areas of finance, with lending and borrowing and exchanges and things like that, is kind of the next natural progression in that regard. So there's no doubt that the DeFi is one of the hugest areas right now, though it's got its fair share of criticisms and roadblocks to mainstream adoption in the way of like regulatory process, people not knowing, since it's growing so fast, people not knowing how to contain it in a sense, and then the institutional fear of things like tax evasion, money laundering. So those are important ideas that we have to consider, but I think there are some misconceptions around that too, that it enables those kind of things when really they've always existed. But now there's this new thing that's not fully understood by these institutions in some ways. So anyway, to carry on from that, the other enormous topic out there is these non-fungible tokens, NFTs. This idea of a digital collectible or a certificate of authenticity that's verifiable and unique.
I can't believe some of the NFTs I'm seeing come out now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's really cool in some ways, and I don't think it's found its true purpose yet.
What do you mean?
Well, it's being used, I think, for the most obvious reasons, and I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around how you can use the idea of a token that is unique from all the other tokens that are, by way of technology related to it. So I don't know exactly yet, because I that's one area, as popular as it is, I haven't really dove into NFTs myself, other than getting a general sense of their existence and what they're all about. But they've worked their way into gaming in a huge way. So the idea that you can have in-game assets that are now verifiably yours in a cryptographically verifiable way is pretty interesting. But can't speak too much more on the NFT front, because again, I don't follow it too close.
Yeah.
Another area in the industry sector is stablecoins. It's this idea of, if you want to get involved in blockchain as a store of value and a way to transfer value, it's really kind of scary, or for lack of a better word, because of the the instability in price and the idea that you could buy into it one day and then the next day it's worth 10% less or sometimes more.
So you're
Uh,
mostly talking about stable coins for investment and money store, not necessarily like building dApps that use them, like decentralized applications that use them.
yeah, so stablecoins as blockchain-based currencies that are tied either strictly or loosely to a fiat currency or some other commodity that has a price considered to be stable. But what you get from that is you get some price stability, and you also get the benefit of the blockchain technology that underlies it. So it's really kind of a necessary thing in that way, at least at the uh,
Volatility.
current position of blockchain as, in regards to being a transfer of value. That's one side of blockchain that uh, I don't go too much into because I'm more interested in the technology being used as services and utilities rather than as money.
Okay. So you were mostly mentioning the trends and stuff, but for you specifically, like what are you excited about? You mentioned services and utilities and stuff like that. Like which which ones or which projects are you the most excited about and why?
There are a couple things going on right now that I think are are really going to have an impact, and one of them is digital identity. The idea that the idea of returning ownership of your personal information, your identity to you. And if you think about how many places online you have your personal information spread around in the form of accounts that you've signed up for and services you use,
Hundreds.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So trying to return that back to the user in one place to have this universally verifiable digital identity, it's just really exciting. And the fact that you could even share only the necessary portions of your identity on a need by need basis is a really interesting use case of that too. So if somebody, when you sign up to a website or a web app, sometimes you're like, why do you need my telephone number? So the idea that you could expose portions of your identity that are needed in whatever scope is a really cool idea.
But I think one of the common examples of that, real quick, is like if you have to prove your age. Like in America, a lot of times you have to prove you're over 18 or over 21 for certain services or to buy things. Um, but you have to show them all your information just to prove your age. But with a blockchain-based identity, it would just be like a Boolean answer. Like, is this person old enough? Yes or no. They don't need to know your exact birthday and all the other information that's really private, that's on your ID card or whatever. So that's one of the simplified, interesting aspects of blockchain-based identity. I just know because I worked on a blockchain identity project in the past. Keep going. Do you remember where you were at?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about a different aspect, which is um, like banking the unbanked, right? Bringing
Yeah.
banking or financial services to unserved portions of the world. And there are a lot of efforts that are doing that, and that's another thing that I think is really exciting as far as proving that this technology has a purpose that's not, it doesn't have to be rebellious and uh,
Yeah.
uh, usurping, right? It's seemingly divided the industry can be. And then another one that's not, it's really cool to me. It's not the same level of impact, I don't think. Although you could probably draw it out to that conclusion. But domain name registration. There are some services like there's the Ethereum name service, and then there's Unstoppable Domains, and probably some others I'm unaware of that allow you to purchase a domain name that is yours forever, one time. So anyone who's ever registered and purchased a domain name knows can relate to this. But the idea of one-time payment, no renewals, censorship resistant because it is yours personally out on a blockchain that is
No one
can't
can
be
take it
tampered
away
with.
from you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can't shut down your domain to block traffic in that sense. And then the idea that your entire web app could be stored on the blockchain or something, if you know about some of these storage mechanisms like IPFS, and accessed through a blockchain top level domain, like you get a site with a something .eth or .crypto or .zil or whatever it is. Um, and you can actually receive cryptocurrency payments to that name. Somebody could send you, instead of trying to find your, super long um, public key address, they could just, you could give them your domain name and they could send payments directly to it. So
That's awesome.
that's kind of a cool nuance to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were some things just talking about trends that weren't industry wide, but just technology centric to what's going on in blockchain. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that.
Um, yeah, sure. Because then we'll move into, how to learn and get into blockchain development. So, yeah, go ahead and
Okay.
talk about the technology.
So in regards to the current state of blockchain, it's kind of reached this critical mass where it's starting to the usage of it is starting to expose inherent flaws in some of the designs that have been built over the years, and there's this need to kind of figure some of this out to increase adoption and maintain usability of the system. So the word that comes to mind probably when I say things like that is scaling. Like it's got to be able to scale up with the number of users and the number of and the throughput uh, that's demanded of it. So that's a huge effort right now across all blockchains, is figuring out scaling. And some think they've got it, others are still working on it. I'm sure some of them will fall short there. But there are some specific ways that are being used to do that um, without sacrificing the characteristics of what a blockchain is meant to do. This idea of decentralization with security and scalability all together. So there's that, and the other crucial thing for blockchain as a whole, as an ecosystem, to be very accessible and useful to the world is interoperability. These
Yeah.
things can't exist. Ethereum can't exist in isolation from Bitcoin, in isolation from whatever else, it might be.
Cardano.
Yeah, any of those systems, Algorand, Cardano, anything like that. They need to be able to communicate with one another, whether that's directly or through some other protocol that manages that. And so that's another huge aspect of what's going to keep blockchain relevant and not stifle its adoption. And then accessibility from the user's point of view of how do I use this thing? How do I get involved and just interact and make this technology part of my life? How do I, if it's as simple as how do I get some cryptocurrency so I can spend it? That can't be a really tedious task, or else no one's
Yeah.
going to do it. They'll just go back to traditional cash systems or fiat systems. So those things, plus privacy, maintaining that, and oracles, the idea of injecting real world data into the blockchain network, because, well, that's what drives a lot of the decisions we make, and so it'll drive a lot of what happens on the blockchain network, and getting that right, the real world data on the blockchain. So those are some things that are just, as I follow the technical side of it, that's all happening right now with urgency.
I feel like you just mentioned a lot of buzzwords. We need to do a follow-up someday. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
I
really
don't want to
interesting.
try and dive into the technicals because I know it's not what this is about today.
Yeah, but it's a good, uh, I guess, a good overview, like the 10,000-foot overview of the state of blockchain right now.
Yeah, because when you ask me what I'm excited about, I can't not mention those things.
Yeah.
So,
All
yeah.
right. So, uh, real quick, we're going to talk about a few more things for the next uh, maybe 6-7 minutes, and then we'll get into answering all of the questions in the chat. Um, so, to kind of transition into getting into blockchain development, um, from your research and what you've seen, and also all your experience in software development and as a teacher of software development, for someone who wants to get into blockchain development, um, what would you recommend their pathway be? Should they start in like another field of software development and understand like web development first? Do you need those skills first? Could they just dive right into a little bit of the basics of I guess blockchain, like how a blockchain works, and then start building contracts without necessarily having, I mean, you need a foundational programming knowledge, but where should someone start, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's almost a necessity to start with traditional software development, with web development. Um, it's Web apps are still typically the user interface for decentralized apps or for blockchain apps, in order to interact with the blockchain. So, these wallets and exchanges and even block explorers and games that use blockchain, anything that's implementing blockchain is generally going to have a user interface that's done through traditional web development. So there's a my there's a difference between probably my recommended approach and my, I don't know what I'd call it, um, eventual approach. My recommended approach is pretty simple. It's probably learn JavaScript, learn maybe a web framework, and
Even
then,
though, even though you've been a Python instructor, and
yes,
that's your favorite language.
yeah, and I'll get to why here in a second.
Okay.
Um, in fact, I'm already at the why. So JavaScript, a web framework to go with it, to kind of power it, and then learn Solidity, because it's the programming language of the Ethereum network. I don't say to learn that because it's necessarily the future long term of blockchain development, but because it's the go-to language for the Ethereum blockchain, which is currently the most popular development platform for decentralized applications. And what that means is you'll have an easier time finding resources for learning how to do blockchain development. There'll be a robust development and tooling ecosystem to help you out. And its popularity makes it the modern standard for what it means to do blockchain development. And not to mention the employment opportunities it opens up for you. So the reason I say that's kind of like the necessary path right now, or whatever I referred to it as, is just because it's the simplest way to start getting into it and just making it happen. JavaScript, web framework, and then go into Solidity while you learn about the blockchain technology itself. And
So
there are, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, there are other languages out there for decentralized apps, smart contracts,
Haskell.
but they're less established and they're somewhat more, I don't know what the word is. Solidity is it looks a lot like JavaScript. So that's the other reason I mentioned JavaScript, even though it's not generally my go-to language outside of web apps. It's got the better one-to-one with Solidity. But there are other languages. There's a Python-based um, smart contract language called Viper with a Y. There's other languages like Algorand has one called Teal, I think. It's an acronym. Cardano has Marlow and Plutus, but then that one's like a functional Haskell-based language, so have fun with that.
Aren't you big into Haskell now?
I started learning it, and I kind of within a half hour of learning it, I just kind of fell in love with it. I'm like, wow, this is a really cool way to program, and it's one of these things where you could either see it and run away, or you see it
Run
and
away.
really latch onto it. And it really spoke to me as a way of doing things in a cool way. So,
Awesome. So, for learning, do you have a list anywhere of all your books, resources, papers, stuff like that that you'd recommend?
no, I go to any of the online courses. There's a platform called Block Geeks that has a lot of video content. There's some others. I know there's a really long free code camp video on Solidity development from beginner to expert. Um, Reading the white papers of some of these blockchain platforms is a really good way to grasp what they're not only what they're trying to do, but how you can interact with it. Um, but yeah, that's I don't have like a curated list that I keep handy.
Okay. Well, maybe if you come up with some things after the stream, I can just post them. Um,
Okay.
and from the article, I'll post it again. The Free Code Camp article that I wrote a couple years ago. Um, oops. There's still some good resources listed in there. I'm trying to post it, copy pasting the wrong thing. Try one more time. For learning blockchain and different platforms that are still around, and a couple books also, like Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum. Those two books by Andreas Antonopoulos go really deep into the technology, and I love those books. I think they're still free on GitHub, or you can buy a copy or get a copy at the library or whatever, but those are definitely worth a read. There's another book called Blockchain Basics that I think both of us have read that was really good. And there's a couple others, so I'll try to compile an updated list of all of those sometime this weekend.
Yeah, the more you can understand the technology, obviously the more it will help you when you program, especially in blockchain, I think, because there are some traps you can fall into doing blockchain development where you write something that's very poorly optimized and it ends up costing a lot.
Yeah.
Anyone who's done blockchain development knows what I mean about depending on where you store things as to whether it incurs a cost.
Yeah. It's like you're using almost the same syntax, but you have to have, I guess, a different mentality of programming. Like, of course, you're programming in a different environment with different constraints, much different constraints than you might normally be used to.
Yeah, and I think it's just there's an awareness necessary that's more consequential than in other environments.
Yeah. Sometimes millions of dollars consequential. Okay, last topic. So, what about the future of blockchain? Like, for anyone getting into blockchain development now, which is a lot of people, like, where do you see blockchain, I guess, going in the next 5 years? What do you see? We kind of talked about what big trends you see currently going on in blockchain, but what about the next 5 years? What do you see there? It's very broad.
Yeah, where do I see it going in 5 years? Everywhere. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be pervasive. even if we don't notice it. Like, if you don't pay attention, you might not notice it, or you might not even need to. Like I mentioned earlier, that you'll be using systems that involve blockchain that you don't have to know about. Like if you go right now and you swipe your credit card at a cafe, you don't really care about how that communication was sent off to a company to process it and all the layers that it went through. You just care that it got you that cup of coffee on the other side of the counter. So in a similar way, I see it headed that direction where we won't necessarily, except for the technologists and the enthusiasts and the ones that want to be involved, we won't have to interface with it directly. Um, I think the user experience of a lot of our world systems in general will improve drastically. So, for example, to use the simple, I use it a lot because it's easy to follow the idea of sending money to someone. Right now, if I want to send you $100, I have to tell my bank that processes it maybe for 3 days or whatever as it talks to your bank and decides that it's finally a settled matter. And so, one of the things that I think we'll see is a lot more instant results during our interactions in these systems. So, where it's maybe just a couple seconds before you receive what I sent. So, there's that. And blockchain is on a trajectory right now as this inevitable emerging technology. It's by inevitable, I mean that it provides a need and satisfies this yearning on many levels, be it technological or social, as far as the impact it can have. And there's a force behind it that reflects that deeply, I think. So the era of blockchain that's currently being formed around us is really reminiscent of the internet era of the 90s and the World Wide Web, uh, because it's in a similar way, it's a technology that disrupts many of our long established systems and ways of doing things. So I think of the evolution of these type of technologies as proceeding in kind of phases where it starts out as this quirky prototype of an idea that's kind of really non-existent in general. And then it turns into this toy for super geeks only. It's got like, it's existent now, but it's got this huge barrier of entry um, technologically. And then a real community starts to form around it. And it becomes existent at that point, but innocuous, right? It's not threatening anything. It's not really making a statement yet. And then real world application happens, and all of a sudden it's got this noticeable impact. And now that it's noticeable, it's either embraced or it's shunned out of either ignorance or fear. And I think history tells us that with these technologies that are inevitable, if you shun it, then you'll probably eventually fade away with how the World Wide Web evolved. You know, anyone who didn't adopt that quickly became irrelevant and inaccessible. So then, you know, continuing on, I think it's as it starts to gain mainstream adoption, there can be kind of confusion and panic that I think we're seeing now with institutions about, okay, this thing is happening. How do we control it? Um, and there's this instinctual tendency towards like self-preservation, which can either take a negative form of like resistance and offensive counteraction, or it can take the positive form of adoption and progress. And um, the communities that are embracing it are moving forward and trying to use it to make the world a better place. And I think, you know, that it feels like that's where things are at. There's a lot of push and pull, but in the background, the community of blockchain doesn't really care. They're still just moving forward because they know it's just inevitable. So just like on a noble front, uh, it- when we do kind of push blockchain forward, there's really no need to be overly rebellious about it at all. Its adoption should ideally take place through genuine curiosity with the goal of improving society's systems. And there's a need now more than ever for cooperation and collaboration between old systems and new, and even between the various blockchain projects that are supposed to be on the same team, to use this technology to unite the world rather than divide it. So I know that's kind of again a very noble statement to to wrap this up, uh, but that's really what it's all about.
Okay. So I was
And I
going
don't
to.
have like the other side of that is as far as where I see it going in the next 5 years, I don't have a particular vision thought out about what each industry will look like.
Because there's so
Um,
many different like branches right now.
yeah. So my answer to that is was the way it was because I see it as a technology as a whole and what it's where it currently sits in that evolution versus where historically I think it's headed.
Okay. Are you ready to take questions?
Yeah, I should jump onto the stream and view the chat because I don't currently see it.
I'll ask. I can ask you the questions from the
All
chat.
right, make them good. Hey everyone, by the way.
um, so Vishnu, he asked. So we talked a little bit about cross-chain protocols before. Um, I don't think we mentioned any specific ones, but like the interoperability between different blockchains like Ethereum, Bitcoin, all those different blockchains being able to talk to each other and transfer value. So someone asked about other platforms like Solana and Polkadot, which I've played around with Polkadot a little as a cross-chain protocol. Do you have any opinions about specific projects like that?
Certainly. Uh, I'll try not to profess any sort of preference, but I can
We all
speak
have
of
our
them
favorite
generally.
projects.
Yeah, I'll speak of them generally. Yeah, Polkadot is a big player in that space, and I think it carries a lot of weight because it's founded by Gavin Wood, who was one of the co-founders of Ethereum. And so right there, it's got a lot of just momentum behind it already. And, he's clearly a very intelligent person, who knows how to get something off the ground. So it's kind of interesting with Ethereum. As I understand it, it was a very fragmented community when it was evolving. As far as the founders, the six or seven or whatever it was, co-founders kind of went off to do these other really interesting projects. So Gavin Wood was one of those, and so Polkadot, again, yeah, it's doing some really cool things. It has some technologies it uses called parachains, and again, I don't want to get real technical, but uh, that's one of them. I'm trying to think of some of the others that are really pushing that space in a big way. And I think Cosmos is
Yeah.
one of those that's doing a lot of cross chain. But yeah, hopefully I addressed that question.
Yeah, I used a while back. I used Cosmos and Polkadot. I think Cosmos was quite a bit easier to use. Polkadot's, I guess I can't think of the word for it. Their way that they achieve consensus and a couple features of how their blockchain solution is set up. It's a bit more complicated. There's more layers. It's really interesting. I'll have to research the evolution of the project, because that's growing really strong now. But yeah, just coming from a development perspective, trying to use this and compare it with other cross-chain protocols, it was a bit more complicated, but also very innovative how they were trying to solve the interoperability challenges. And then Solana, I haven't really used Solana, but that's another blockchain platform. I don't know if you can talk about that at all.
No, just that it's seen a lot of prosperity lately. It's been become very popular and
Yeah.
kind of, you know,
All right.
grown in that regard. Oh, you mentioned consensus, and I just want to, we're not talking about how blockchain works, but on a related note to development, like when you see this technology, like don't let it intimidate you. It's it's such a cool technology because it combines different aspects of like cryptography and peer-to-peer networks, decentralized communication, and game theory. It's like you get to mess around with all these cool concepts that combine to create this technology, and it's just so much fun. So
Yeah, it is.
don't let it become an intimidating thing if you're approaching it. Anyway,
So have you heard of a project called Morales?
I have not. I'm
Um,
surprised.
so,
I'm not surprised. There are so many projects out there.
yeah, and you probably haven't gotten into this exact, I guess, type of development yet, but it's basically to build, the project says it's to build serverless Web3 decentralized applications. So I guess we can't talk about that. But if you join my Discord, I would love to have a discussion about some of these technologies and building decentralized applications. The link for my Discord is in the description.
Yeah, I'm in there. So
Yeah.
you can find me in there.
It-
DLOM, I
Yep.
believe.
You can at DLOM in my Discord. Put it in the chat. All right. So, there was another. Here it is. Oh yeah. So Nobody's, who's actually like my original follower from all my streams and videos. He said, it's kind of like a comment, not really a question, but maybe you want to comment on this. He said it feels like the blockchain is living through its own .com bubble right now.
Yeah, it's similar to what I alluded to earlier about the internet era and the analogy between the 90s and how that evolved and what's happening right now. It's at this point where there's a lot of really cool stuff, there's a lot of really ridiculous stuff, and that kind of comes together to make this bubble that is like, well, when this thing blows open, what's going to be left? What's going to survive that?
But don't you think it bubbled a couple years ago? Like 2018? Is it just
I think
bubbling
it's
up
had a couple.
more and more?
I think with each what's the word?
Bubble.
Yeah, I guess. With each growth in a certain aspect of the technology and things like that, it kind of makes its own new bubble. So it's hard to look at the state of DeFi and NFTs and stuff right now and convince yourself it's not something just waiting to disperse into relevant versus irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we'll just have to see it play out. That's another reason why I like investing in the technology and not, the speculation market, because that seems to be the center of the bubble. All right, so someone had a question about Hashgraph. I don't know how much you know about Hedera Hashgraph. I believe it would call itself a post-blockchain technology. Like there's Hollow, there's other technologies that are an evolution of blockchain protocols. So do you consider it, or he's saying that many consider it more efficient than the good old blockchain model. What are your thoughts about that?
I can't speak to it on that regard. I just know that it's like was mentioned just now. It's not technically blockchain technology. It's like tangentially related. It's also like a proprietary technology. So I tend to favor more of the open source, like free to use type of stuff. So
Okay.
that's one reason I haven't really explored it too much, because and also just there's so much out there to know. You got to kind of pick your battles, and I'm focused on the core blockchain technology rather than even the things that are like the directed acyclic graph based stuff is one of these, like you mentioned, like post blockchain or whatever, even though it's probably really old, like blockchain is.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Um,
But I guess I have neither good nor bad things to say about it.
a lot of the comments in the chat were just comments, not questions. Like, nobody says he wants to drink an NFT coffee, and a couple other things.
If whoever said that, if they could elaborate, I would love to know what you mean.
I guess if you're in VR, you could drink an NFT coffee. And then if you're hooked up to some kind of brain something, it could make your brain feel like you're drinking coffee.
Yeah, we
That's
need,
the future. That's the 5-year plan.
yes, Neuralink combined with NFTs, I think
Yes,
is like
and VR.
deep up in there.
Neuralink, VR, NFTs. Those 3 technologies.
All right, so someone in the chat, start working on that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and someone mentioned Visa, that they're implementing blockchain for credit card processing. Yeah, I think any top company, I believe all or almost all of the Fortune 500 companies are investing in blockchain right now. I think any of those companies who isn't looking into blockchain solutions is a little bit behind at this point. Do you have any comments about that?
You're absolutely right. I mean, everyone from IBM to even now the big investment banks are waking up to it, and they're like keeping a portion of their portfolio in things like Bitcoin. So that right there is this huge statement for the relevancy. Again, not to focus on price, but the adoption of it. And yeah, it's just, I think, like you said, if you're just now starting to adopt it, you could argue that you're either right on time or you're a little late. Hopefully you're not too late, because we know how some of these deeply traditional systems, how long they can take to evolve and to adapt to a new technology. So it's cool to see companies like Visa coming around to it.
Yeah. All right, one more question, and then we'll take any more questions in the Discord because we already ran a little over. So Parag is asking, what core concepts do I need to master to learn blockchain development? Also, what database and programming languages do I need to learn?
You can help me out on this one, Gwen, too, because I know you've done a lot of blockchain
There's
development as well.
a fly in my office, so if I'm swatting at something, don't judge me.
Let's see. Let's collaborate on this answer here. So
Core concepts. I mean, there's programming. You need to learn software development, and then you need to learn how, the basics of how blockchain works, like what is a block, how are they linked together. You need to know a little bit about game theory and cryptography and how they're applied to the blockchain. Basically, the sections in the article that I posted, it's in the description, my free code camp article from a few years ago that I'm going to update soon. Do you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that?
Yeah, as far as that's kind of the the
Understanding.
overarching surroundings of areas you need to know about. But when you sit down at the keyboard, like what do you need, right? How are you going to dive into this and make something happen? You're going to have to learn about the tooling system behind that particular blockchain. So with Ethereum, you have certain tools to go from a code editor to a smart contract that lives in a blockchain. So part of that process is uh, things like typically a block explorer, something you can use to watch the blockchain locally, because you're going to end up with this local version of a blockchain as a test bed. You're not going to go test out your stuff in a real blockchain that's in production to work out the bugs, because these things, once you deploy them, you can't change them. So, knowing the systems around the particular blockchain you want to work with uh, is going to obviously be necessary. And what that can involve sometimes is also learning how to use wallets, because you're going to have to interact with a wallet to make things happen with a smart contract. Um, let's see. So the the consensus model around the blockchain, whether it's proof of work, proof of stake, understanding what that means, or proof of anything nowadays. I've heard of like proof of believability,
Yeah.
proof of proof or something like that. So there's no end to those. But understanding the implications of that consensus model, because that's going to drive a lot of the decisions you make.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Did I miss anything as far as going from code editor to deployed smart contract?
Probably. Like I said, we're going to compile a list of resources and organize them. So if we forgot anything, we'll put it in that article. Um, so thanks for all your questions. If you have more questions, join my Discord and we can answer any more questions in there. Real quick, before we close, I do want to get a couple bits of information from Daniel. So last question, or second to last question. So what projects are you currently working on now? Like, what are your cool projects that you're working on in 2 minutes?
Okay. I have one that I'm maintaining at the moment that is called Crypto Dip. It's a personal project that I decided to put out in the world to benefit anyone who wants to use it. It's at cryptodip.app. Um, it's it's basically a way to automate something I was doing in spreadsheets, which is that I have some money invested in different uh, tokens, in different blockchains, um, not for the purposes of speculation, just because I actually believe in these things and I want to help them out and kind of go on that journey with them. Because if you don't know, when you hold tokens for any given blockchain, uh, for well specific ones really, you're actually helping the network if you stake those tokens on the network to provide security. So it's not all about buying and price go up and when Lambo, right? But that tool can come across as that. But I use it to just keep an eye on my holdings and find opportunities. So take advantage of the speculation market, and the emotional decisions to see well, it's called crypto dip, right? When the price dips, well, I'll use that opportunity to uh, increase the value of what I already believe in. So there's that, and then I'm starting work on. I don't know what this is going to turn into yet, but it's kind of more of a fun project than anything that's going to provide world-changing utility. and it's a way to view the entire cryptocurrency or blockchain world in a fun way in your browser, and to navigate that world as almost like a game, to where you don't have to go click around to a bunch of different websites. You can visualize it in an interactive experience, and I'm being a little bit nebulous about it because it's not fully formed yet, and I also kind of want it to take shape a little more before I announce anything. But it's got aspects of uh, gaming. It's got aspects of NFTs and smart contracts,
And lots of Easter eggs.
yeah, and lots of Easter
I got
eggs.
to
And
take a peek.
yeah,
I'll definitely post it in my Discord when that's ready.
all right.
Awesome. So where can people find you, Daniel?
I kind of keep a low profile as far as social networks go. I'm on LinkedIn, and that's really about it. I have a Twitter account that I use to follow people I want to follow, but I'm not active on it.
And you have
Uh,
GitHub,
yeah, I'm on GitHub for sure.
and then you're in my Discord.
And I'm on Discord, yes.
All right. So LinkedIn, Discord, GitHub. I have LinkedIn in the description. I'll post his other profiles, but you can find him pretty much anywhere under the name DLOM, anywhere that he is.
Yeah, and if I'm missing out on any social experiences through some of these apps I'm not signed up for, let me know. Let me know what I'm missing out on. That's really provides value.
You're missing out on, yeah, lots of discussion and probably gaining time that you use to research blockchain. So
What about all those TikToks?
it's a trade-off. I don't have TikTok. All right. Any final words, Daniel, before we close?
Oh, nothing I haven't said already.
I mean,
Just
we could
that,
talk all day about this.
yeah, I've had to hold back on technical deep dives. I love talking about this stuff. I love spending my time on it, and I don't know where it'll take me, and that's exciting.
Awesome. Some final advice from Nobodies. He says, don't FOMO. I'm guessing he talks with crypto. Yeah, and if you look on Daniel's GitHub, DLOM123 on GitHub, you'll see he uses lots of modern crypto lingo, so it's kind of fun. All
So
right.
I do follow the culture.
Yeah, hodling and everything else. All right, so thanks so much for joining. Again, join my Discord, link in the description. If you want to ask either of us any questions about blockchain and continue the discussion, or maybe bring up a topic that we missed here. We didn't talk about a lot of things, like I don't think we mentioned zero knowledge proofs and so many other like really cool things that are happening in blockchain right now. So again, thanks Daniel, and I hope to have you back on soon, and I hope to do another blockchain episode soon in the future as well. So have a great day everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Gwen. Bye, everyone.